You are the face of God. I hold you in my heart. You are my family. I know that truth deep in my soul. The face of God in the mirror, the face of God in the room, the face of God in the world. We are all one of that. We can call it God, Spirit, universe, source. It is still all one thing. Each of us as individuals with all of the potential of our source. The potential for love, the potential for peace, the potential for prosperity, the potential for health, all within each of us because we are of spirit, and that's where it all begins. I know today the way of the peaceful warrior, perhaps, the way of knowing that while I may have challenges in front of me, I am not alone. I am never alone. All I need is within me to navigate the way forward in the challenges in my life. Within me is all the love that ever existed. Within me is all the power, all the possibilities that ever existed. Within each of us is this. So I, in great joy and willingness, open my arms and say, yes, Spirit, fill me with more. Fill me, help me understand, and help me guide me to understand what that more might look like. And help me say yes to that more, because it is what I deserve. It is what each of us deserves because we exist. So I am grateful for today's talk. I am grateful for today's community gathering of souls. We imagine that we're all in one room together, but actually we're just all in one existence together. Together, we can do it all. Because we are it all. Except for really good grammar. So with joy and gratitude, I release my word, that word of knowing that community, together with, this is how I survive and thrive. This is how each of us survives and thrives. So I'm going to let these words go into that law, and that law just says, yes, ma'am, right now, and so it is. So take 2 minutes to know your oneness. And we will return with joyous music. Thank you.
Good morning. Take a breath, yes. So we've been talking this whole year about the idea of living out loud, which is funny because our mic goes out, on speaking life, right? Yeah. And I love Amy's shirt, raise some heck. Yes, raise some heck. And so this month we're talking about speaking truth to circumstance, which is a play on the phrase of speaking truth to power. But circumstances sometimes seem like power, but they're not. They're control, they're kind of stuff in the way. And so we need to speak truth, we need to remember truth, and be in that presence. And so today we look at the idea of the wise warrior. The wise warrior. Sort of similar, Buffy referred to it as the peaceful warrior, but the wise warrior. And I'd like to say when the wise warrior walks into the bar of life, no one picks a fight with them, because their presence alone is enough. Sort of like a martial artist. When they walk into a situation, nobody wants to fight with them because they get that there's no point in fighting with them. The way of the world is the unwise, unpeaceful warrior that goes jousting at every windmill that comes along, whereas the wise warrior is anchored in peace and poise. You've noticed the unwise warrior, right? Jousting at every windmill that comes around, yes? Yeah. I know none of you have been that, but you know people. I've never been that, but I know people. They're focused on what needs to happen, not what or who they need to fight. They recognize that fighting only creates more fighting. So instead, recognizing that all is already one, all is already whole, they simply bring a recentering of any situation into a contemplation, into a manifestation of that oneness. So recognize the oneness and allow that oneness then to manifest in form in whatever circumstance or situation they're in. Ernest Holmes, one of my favorite quotes, I use it often, says, "One alone in consciousness with the infinite constitutes a complete majority." One alone in consciousness with the infinite constitutes a complete majority. We all perceive things out there that need to change, that we want to change. But the out there, both individually in our own personal lives and collectively in the world, is only a reflection of the in here. What's in here? Einstein reminded us that we cannot solve a problem at the level of consciousness that created the problem. So if we want to change our lives, or if we want to change the world, we must change our consciousness, our beliefs. Don't you hate that? I'd much rather change that out there than me have to change. So we have to change our perspective. We have to change our beingness. Tom Johnson, in his book Action Does It, wrote, what we are living is what we really believe. Whatever we are seeking, we cannot have anyway, because the law of mind keeps taking from us that which we are seeking. We only have what we are. It's one of those you can't get there from here. You have to, in consciousness, shift to I'm already there. I already am the peace. I already am the love. I already am the health. I already am that. As long as we're seeking it, we're holding it out there away from us. We have to become it. I've been using this quote by Plotinus. I do not argue, I contemplate, and as I contemplate, I let fall the seeds of thought into the mirror of mind, which then becomes the mirror of matter. I don't argue, I don't fight with circumstance. I contemplate what I want, knowing that that then sows seeds in my mind, and by the law of mind, that sows seeds then into matter, into form, because form is created by our mind. Troward tells us that the universe creates by contemplation. So it's important to pay attention to what we're contemplating, right? Where is our mind most of the time? We use the term mental equivalent. It means my normal, my underlying idea of life. How do I view life? How do I view myself? Is life a battle? Is life a classroom that I've got to get the lessons right to pass or fail? Is it a playground, heaven as earth? What's my normal? Is it peace and trust? Or is it fear, upset, and anger? What's my normal? The wise warrior girds themselves for battle by being aware of what they're carrying into life, recognizing life as a mirror. If we want to change the outer, we must begin with changing the inner. We have a little sign in one of our bathrooms in there that says, "There's nothing to be healed, only truth revealed." That's that capital T, truth. We don't have to go out there and heal things. We don't have to go out there and fix things. We have to reveal what's already so. So the way of the world is to jump up and down and scream and yell about all kinds of things. And while this may feel very righteous, and it may feel like we're doing something really positive, it has proven ineffective at creating real lasting change. Have you noticed? Lots of people have been screaming and yelling for centuries and millennia about all the things that are wrong, but it's not until we change. Often just doing that pushes people away, and even those who may agree but don't want those methods. So making war on outer circumstances just empowers those circumstances. There's been several different Star Trek episodes where it's like they're trapped in some sort of thing that if they start to fight with it, if they start to use their phasers to try and blow it away, it just gives that outer thing more power. It becomes more powerful. And they have to find some way other than fighting. If we want to change the world, again, our personal world or the greater world, we have to change how we view that world. Aman Makwami, in his book, Yes, You Can Change the World, says love and compassion, the way we traditionally think about them, will not change the world. Love isn't something you think about, it isn't something you do, it's who you are. Am I a person of love, a being of love as I engage with the world? Am I a being of compassion as I engage with the world? As religious scientists, we know that all is one, that behind or beneath or within all circumstances, no matter how ugly they may appear, there is this divine presence. I love the song. It says, something speaking, I can't remember the exact line, but it was speaking it even when it looks like it's the darkest night. Speaking life. And that's what we're talking about, speaking life. When we commit to seeing things differently, we create things differently. When we commit to seeing things differently, we create differently. We're operating from a different way. It's not what we do, it's who we are that creates the real change. So when the wise warrior steps back and centers themselves prior to entering any situation, they can look past appearances and see the core reality that is present and coax it forward, often without bloodshed, which is a good thing, yes? Instead of getting angry over situations, instead we can ask questions such as, what do I want to see here instead? What is Spirit's highest idea here? We can start to contemplate, what is it that I really want? And then become that by contemplation. If I want to see more love here, I contemplate what? Love. If I want to see more gentleness, if I want to see more inclusivity, I contemplate inclusivity, gentleness. So instead of fighting and arguing, we can follow a path based on seeing the intrinsic worth, the divinity of every person we encounter. That's your practice this week, by the way. Seeing the divinity of every person you encounter. And this alone shifts our interpersonal relationships, and the world is based on relationships. And then engage in 3 focus practices. The first is to focus on how to make the most of the time we have with every person instead of focusing on how little time we have with every person. What if we could be fully present with this person in this moment, even if it's for 2 minutes, instead of feeling guilty, oh, I should spend more time with them. If I'm sitting here, thinking I should spend more time with them, I'm not with them in this moment. I'm in some past or future. So focusing and being present with every person rather than thinking how little time we have. The second focus then is to focus not on the outer appearance, but on the person within, both the pain and the potential, to truly see who it is that's in front of us. All of them. I remember I was at a conference several years ago from Religious Science where there was a large African-American woman who was talking about inclusivity, and she goes, if you do not see me as a large, fairly overweight black woman, you don't see me. Because part of that is both pain and potential. And we all have that. So seeing each person, the person within both the pain and potential. And the final focus is focused not on what's wrong with a person, but on what makes them right. See their strength instead of their weakness. I remember Tony Robbins one time talking about working with a client who was massively overweight and wanted to shift that. And he said, first notice that you are massively creative in creating what you have now. Your creativity is wonderful. Look what you've created. Now let's use that creativity, that massive creativity, in a new direction. Not making her wrong, noticing what she's doing right, and shifting that. And we can all do that. How many of us have massively created things that we really don't want in our lives? Okay? But our massive creativity that created those can be used in a new direction. So our becoming the change we want to see, becoming the change we want to see, may seem like a small thing in the face of what appears like overwhelming challenges in the world. But small changes can result in large effects, little by little. Jesus used the idea of a mustard seed. And if you toss a mustard seed out into a hillside, give it a couple of years and you've got an entire hillside of mustard seed, right? It grows and spreads. He also used the metaphor of a little bit of yeast and a large amount of flour will leaven the whole flour. Nature provides so many examples of this. A little bit of change, a little bit of something will shift something far bigger than that. So simply seeing a person as a divine and human being simultaneously, instead of an inhuman enemy, seeing their intrinsic worth can have a snowball effect more than we might ever expect or imagine. We have no idea the seeds that we plant and where they will grow. The wise warrior knows it's not their personal power that creates change. Instead of this attitude of, I gotta make it happen, the wise warrior knows they're co-creating with the infinite. So we open to life happening through us, rather than trying to make life happen. I know none of you have ever done that make life happen thing. I might have once or twice engaged in that process, sometimes fairly recently. But when we open to letting it happen, flow through us, when we recognize that we're in connection with this infinite presence, that itself is life, and therefore wants to be more and express more of life. And we just simply become openings for that to flow. My prayer every Sunday before I do a talk is, Spirit, speak through me. Not me, not David, what I have to say. Spirit, speak through me. We understand that we can use and direct this infinite power. Raymond Charles Barker, I love Raymond Charles Barker. He is just a kind of a shoot straight kind of minister. He was one of the early great ministers in our movement. In his book called Treat Yourself to Life, he says, "You are in the midst of a power which is saying to you, use me, direct me, express me. I am ready." Are you? Yes. And that is the question. Are we ready? Are we really ready to tap into that power? Are we ready to stop putting our attention on what upsets us, what's not working, on what we don't want, and instead direct it towards what we really want to create? It sounds so simple, but it really is that simple. Form follows consciousness. Where attention goes, energy flows. We've heard all this. And it's so simple. And really easy, right? So are you ready to stop letting the media, outer circumstances, and other people's actions capture our attention like bright, shiny objects? Yeah. That momentarily feel good, and instead, are we willing to do the deep inner work to become the change we want to see? Max Dupree said, "The greatest thing is, at any moment, to be willing to give up who we are in order to become all that we can be." To give up who we are in order to become all that we can be. He wrote a book called Leadership Jazz, and in that book he tells the story of his granddaughter Zoe, and the word Zoe, by the way, means life in Greek. And she was born 4 months prematurely, weighing 1 pound and 7 ounces, 11 inches long. He said he could put his wedding ring, all the way up her arm to her shoulder. That's how tiny she was. And they gave her about a 5 to 10% chance of ever surviving. Her biological father had left a month before her birth, and the neonatal nurse explained that Max needed to fill the role of the surrogate father. And the nurse told him to come to the hospital every day and visit Zoe, and to rub her body, legs, and arms with the tip of his finger, while telling her over and over how much he loved her, so that she could connect his voice with his touch. At the time, he was the CEO of Herman Miller Furniture. And he observed that a leader must be able to connect our voice with our touch. Our voice of love, harmony, and unity must connect to how we touch the world, how we touch each other, even how we touch ourselves in our own lives. The good news is that at our core, this is who we already are. We are this love, we are this wholeness, we are this unity. So we're not trying to become something we aren't, we're trying to unbecome what we thought we were. We're trying to unbecome who we aren't. So ultimately, what we all want is to live as God. Yes? As the divine beings we already are, and since God is love, it's what we're all seeking. Some of us forget that, and then we live backwards. And what's the word live backwards? Evil, right? So it's just that. So some of us live backwards and we seem to become monsters, which we talked about the very first week of this month, and yet beneath the scary outer is the divine inner. Those of us who are a little more awake must become surrogate spiritual parents or mentors, seeing the intrinsic worth, divinity, and value of each other, touching each other with love, instead of with anger, blame, shame, guilt, and all that junk. It's not the way of the world. It's not the way most of us were raised, but it is the way of the wise warrior. We can no longer hide in our little caves of safety. Have you noticed? The world's too interconnected, which reflects the interconnectedness of all being. So as we stand up and face the monsters out there, we discover and heal the monsters within. That's where our work really lies. It's like the Hindu concept of Indra's net, where there's this net, and at the intersection of the junction of every single strand of the net is a jewel, which represents a point of consciousness, a point of being, a point of one of us, and it reflects every other jewel in the net. every other jewel in this strand of the web of life. We realize that we are all interconnected, and that means that the good news is that as any of us change, all of us reflect that change, even if imperceptibly. But like there's some bamboo that will take years and years and it will grow only about this tall, and then all of a sudden will shoot up 6 feet in 1 year. Years ago, I was in Los Angeles when there had been a huge fire that had burned up in the hills. It was called the Cane and Doom Fire back in 1977, 78. And I had gone up there as a member of the Sierra Club's camera committee at the time. And I had gone up there to photograph the devastation. And even though it had been days after the fire had passed through, the ground was so hot that it melted the soles of my Vibram shoes. I had my hiking boots on. And I had to buy new hiking boots, or get resold hiking boots because of how hot it was. 6 months, and I was just like, oh my God, this is terrible. 6 months later, I went back again with a friend who was a naturalist. And he was pointing out all the growth that was happening. And he said, this is fire seed. It takes a fire to germinate the seed. It will not grow until then. It will lay in the ground for years, dormant, until something comes along to spark it into life. Our willingness to be wise warriors, agents of spirit, practitioners of truth, creates change. Perhaps not as fast as our little egos would like it to be, right? We all want what we want, and we want it right now, yes? Come on, let's just admit it, okay? But that change is happening. And the only real question is, will we actively participate in the evolutionary change that's being called forth? Will we actively participate? Will we say yes? Or will we hide out and pretend there's nothing we can do and hide until change washes away our comfy shelter? I know your answer is already, yes, I will actively participate. We have tools of change. We have principles. We have practices. We have methods that we teach. These equip us to be mighty warriors. These equip us to be agents of change. Like Kali, who we talked about last week, we're equipped with the tools for the job. Let's use them. So our spiritual practice this week is two-part. Number one, contemplate a quality you're being called to express more of in your life. Connect your voice and touch of that quality. Contemplate a quality that you're being called to express more of in your life. And each of us knows what that is if we get really honest with ourselves. And the second practice is to what I kind of alluded to earlier, practice seeing the intrinsic value of everyone you meet. Practice seeing, looking for it. Have you noticed some people it's harder to see the intrinsic value? Okay, but see it. Notice where your mind wants to dismiss some as unimportant and others as inferior or superior. You might also practice bringing to mind someone whose intrinsic value you know you have difficulty seeing. Invite your inner self to guide you in changing your perspective and seeing more deeply, not fooled by outer illusions and outer surfaces. So are you willing to play with those two practices this week? Yeah. Great. So I want to close with a quote. This comes from Edwene Gaines from her book, The 4 Spiritual Laws of Success. She says, when you choose your divine purpose, you're framing your life with meaning. You are also taking an important step in spiritual development to demonstrate to yourself that you have the power to effect change. That you are bigger, stronger, more powerful, and more creative than you thought. And then finally from Ernest Holmes, error is ever a coward before truth and cannot hide itself from capital R reality, which sees through everything, encompasses all, and penetrates even the prison walls of the mind with its clear effulgence. And if you don't know what effulgence is, I'm glad my tongue did not twist on that one from that earlier song. Effulgence is our brightness. Effulgence is our light. Something that's effulgent is brilliant. You and I are brilliant. So see through the prison walls of the mind with this clear light. We have an affirmation to say. Join me in saying this. I stand in the power and wholeness of spirit that I am. I stand in the power and wholeness of spirit that I am. I invite you to go forth this week and be wise warriors. Thank you. All right, let's look around at the faces of God. Remember that your face is one of those faces. Connect heart to heart, being to being, without stinging. We go within, we remember that there is this one presence, pure love, pure life, everywhere and always present. And we are one of it because it is all that there is. Everything and everyone is one of it because it is all that there is. And so I speak my words, we go forward this week with wisdom, with love. Bringing peace, bringing wholeness and health into all circumstances. Seeing the intrinsic value of every person we meet, ourselves included, contemplating what it is we choose to see in our lives and in the world. And gratitude for knowing that this shifts things, no matter how imperceptibly, that our work, our practice shifts life. I release this word into a law that moves it into form, expression, and experience in the world, in our lives, right here, right now. It is already doing so because it is already so. And we simply affirm that together by saying, and so it is.